going to be doing a reading. I've got many things I've done in the past. I found something which I'd written, I would think it was 2008 or 2009. 2008 or 2009. The questioning and the snow shovel. The beautiful part of Newfoundland's marine weather is that it is so very much like a lady that gets up earlier in the morning than you do. She's the type to hire a lawyer when you are not looking, just so you remember the easy ways of summer love after the cold, hard, painful, and never-ending ways of frozen wrath. But let's talk about the weather, shall we? During our brief respite from the hustle and bustle of the day, what with public defense and Grand Theft Auto and all that came with it, the wind had begun to change directions. It came around a full 16 points on the compass, with all the subtle grace of a sledgehammer, driving low-lying puffy clouds of fouler temperament ahead of it. Using my well-trained skill with my driver's side window crank, I coaxed 2 inches of the window into retreat into its befouled mechanisms. I could smell the snow coming. It had a certain texture and taste to it, a fresh crispness that sits upon your nostrils and says, "Hey, you, Rube, I hope you brought your snow shovel." Turning the radio on, I switched to my FM preset for the MP3 player. The player itself accommodated FM transmitters, but it never had quite accommodated the particular brand of FM transmitter that I had purchased without extended warranty. Caused the player to shuffle through songs in a random and unpredictable manner that I found enduring once or twice. I held it up, opening its leather-bound front and quickly selecting a suitable ambient piece by John Williams and the London Symphony. Patches of broken sunlight were racing across the parking lot. Joey looked at me. I'll never forget the sincerity in his voice. "Are you going to kill me now?" he began, a slight twinge of sarcasm petering off the common quiet. His voice became steady, and his eyes were level, bright, and he wasn't blinking. "'Cause if you are..." "Okay, Joey, bottom line is this," I began, considering his forthright introduction to be compelling and to the point. "We're even, if you like, since you only allegedly stole my car and I haven't turned you in for being the thief you clearly are not. My word, here's my car. You got your thrills, I got mine, so we're square, yes?" I thought the offer was amicable. Good first round bargaining point that would break the ice and get us to brass tacks where the action was. But I was far from through. "Now, Joey," I continued, "seeing as we're all square, I wonder if I could interest you in a business proposition. This would involve you being employed by me for the period of the remainder of this working day. I'll pay you cash for your troubles, and you'll do whatever I need you to do during that time. You interested?" Joey thought for a few minutes. I hoped it was a careful process. He might not have appeared to be much in size and stature, but something told me that those quick brown eyes of his were animated by fair to middling imagination, and not by chemical imbalance. He sat still, crossed his arms as he thought about the deal. "How much?" he asked. I'd done my books at the beginning of the day after Cy had called, and I'd run back into the house. Courier job to pay my way alone. The article at the fort was all gravy. I could afford to split it with Joey if he wanted to work for it. $10 an hour, I offered. I say this was written 2008 or so. Couple of hours sitting mostly on your butt, doing necessary research, periods of actual physical labor. We'll end up at the fort to catch the job fare too. I'll get you there in time to see all the sights. You'll be free to cut loose any time after we're at the fort. But then you're off the clock and I'll get all the money." "What do you mean, all the money?" Joey asked, raising an eyebrow. "The day is only young, Joey," I said, selecting a tack conducive to good work and a sharp mind. "Who knows what opportunities might knock at your door between now and day's end? You have until the time I finish smoking this cigarette to reply." I produced a cigarette butt first, and then I turned it around and put it in my lips I revealed that it was, in fact, a snuff. A snuff is a common subspecies of the family of smokes, one that you'll find in most any building, usually within 3 or 4 paces of the entrance. The snuffs result when someone doesn't have a regular cigarette break per se. What I mean to say is the result of having to cull a full cigarette down by only smoking a few rapid and generally very wary puffs. You catch a snuff by repeating the ritual only a few minutes and before quickly knocking off the cherry from the top of the cigarette. Extinguishing the remaining embers with your fingers, you now have a funny party trick for the next time you have to pick a fight or play the clown. Most important of all, get back to work. Joey looked at me puzzled when he saw the short cigarette between my teeth. "Saves the draw," he said. "You're like the teacher I had last year for basic English. Use big words like that too. You got me for the afternoon, sure." "Oh, not so quick, Joey," I said, rolling the cigarette rudely between my fingers and taking a generous haul of smoke. Butt heated quickly and I cut it shorter than I could have. "Seems to me your resume is certainly in question." I paused, blew the smoke out the window. "Why, you could say that anything at all, you're anything at all, and it would fall to me to assess your performance to determine if you're worthy or not. Fact of the matter is, we've already conducted one experiment, and it has cost me time, Joey." Another quick puff, Joey meeting my eyes and intent head on for a second. "Time I really don't have to spare, so in a matter of good faith, we're going to have a little job interview." I picked my place in time. "We're here, and Joey, I don't care by whom you swear by." Joey was looking out the window, maybe the third little glance out that way. "So there's no Bible involved, put your hand upon and tell the truth. Just think about these questions very hard and tell me the answers, and I'll be able to extend my trust to you, in good faith, to do what you say you will do. It will then be on your honor, Joey, to do as you said you will do, and we will have a contract. You understand that?" I offered him a cigarette, produced from thin air from Joey's point of view. He didn't see me put the cigarette in my hand. He'd been watching me and looking out the window. That effect must have been quite chilling given the right setup. Joey nodded his agreement, but he did not want the cigarette anymore. "I don't want to smoke anymore, Rube," he said, looking right at me. "Dumb habit. And yeah, I understand. What's the first question?" "Where are you from, Joey?" I asked without malice. The MP3 player shuffled, hitting the folk rock track. When I turned down nearly at once. Something about thirsty boots that sounded like suicide on stage. I don't pay attention to the lyrics. The cigarette in my hand didn't look as funny as it did mere seconds before. Joey loosened the jacket, looked at me sideways. I turned the heater down too. "Well, it's like this," he said. "It's always like this, friends. I grew up in the south side, see over there in the south side hills there. Except I was from the bottom of them hills there. I don't know who my dad is, so I moved around a lot with my mom. I'm the youngest," he added. He was breathing steady, always a good sign, but he'd hitched when he got the youngest. Flipped the butt of the snuff out the window onto the parking lot. Full cigarette stuck between my ear. Uke style. Uke shows up in daylight hours sometimes, but he didn't want to smoke just now. I laid my lighter on the dash. "Joey, I'm glad to know where you come from. Good answer," I said. Are you still living with your mom, and how can I reach you reliably?" I settled back into my seat and relaxed, releasing the catch of the seat back a single notch. "No, I'm not with my mom," he said. "I'm staying on Cattle Street with my mom's brother's second wife. She's his second cousin too, she told me once." He added, matter of fact, a fine eye for detail. I could jive with that. "You can call up there and ask for me." "Joey, when you said I sound like your English teacher, what did you mean by that?" I asked, reaching beyond my seat for the press bag with my notepad. "Time to take notes." "And I mean, really tell me why. Give examples." "You have a funny way of putting things," he said quickly. "It's not big words, but it's a way to use them to get the point across. Mr. Bradley was the same thing. You did it English right and used to make up role plays for the letters we had to write, make them real things like a job at a gas station where you have to choose real things to say about ourselves. You read them, correct them, pass them back, And you write a reply note at a gas station. Sometimes it'd be funny, sometimes you get the job. Sometimes you get the job and you didn't want to work there anymore. Those are really funny ones. One time I got a reply from him, it was supposed to be from a bank manager. I had to write this letter, so he asked him for a loan to start a store. Oh, we had to pick something we was interested in, right? Joy was getting animated and relaxing much more, remembering something of value to him. He became aware I was taking notes. We had to write a long letter, and it included a description of the store and why we thought it was a good business idea and how much money we figured was necessary. And then he said that the figures didn't matter really, but we had to include them for his necessary information. First thing I thought of was the astronomy store where people could buy things like telescopes and books about the stars. But it would be really cheap. You could rent telescopes, he said, turning to me. That's about that's about the only thing I could say I was interested in since I was a little kid. I'd always been that way. Knew lots about the stars from just the TV and stuff in the school library, and sometimes you meet girls there too. Anyway, I figured since the numbers didn't matter, I could write a bank letter for Mr. Bell. I mean, the bank manager, since I really did know all this astronomy stuff. And if I knew what kind of telescope I would rent, I'd put 3 whole paragraphs into the letter talking about just out of rental that this certain kind of telescope was just a thing because it was easy to use. It was powerful. It had a special kind of lens that helped to filter out the city lights. Well, I talked about the telescope. Don't really know how much it cost. I had a magazine and book bag where I'd seen the ad, but it didn't have a price. Figured couldn't cost more than a few $1,000s. Anyway, the numbers didn't matter. So I put in as costing only $499.99 like it was a good thing. And that was that. Joey paused. I got the grade back for that. It came with a short letter and it wasn't funny at all. In fact, I thought first it was Mr. Bradley was teasing me like a girl somehow, because he made it sound like I hand delivered the letter to him in his office at the bank. And he said the only thing stinkier no idea was me. He gave me a passing grade anyway, and he said but the way he dissed me bothered Rube. So, the way that he dissed me bothered me, Rube. So after class, I went back. Mr. Bradley knew I would because he'd stayed standing there while everyone else left, but he didn't take his eyes off of me, so I just sat there. And he moved over to the desk and asked me why I'd lied about the price of the telescope. I told him right off the bat I hadn't lied. I'd only made up the prices. The price didn't matter. He looked at me steady the whole time, like you've been doing. Then he asked me if I knew what something was. Plagiarism, I offered. That means you've stolen someone else's idea, Joey. He meant that the ad you used as a source for your information, right? Ah, that's it exactly, he said with a little smile. He said that I should have included the source of my information. And I asked to see that I'd gotten the idea from. I showed it to him. Then he said something else funny. He said I was going to have to make up my mind about how serious I was real quick. Like it mattered or something. It meant something to him more than it meant to me. He told me he found a real price of the telescope. It was $12,000. And he asked me had I changed my letter. He added. What did you say, Joey? I asked. I didn't know. I didn't care. I told him he was a dumb son of a bitch. Told him it was best stop slapping the make on me with his passive aggressive bullshit, and I told him he wasn't a very good teacher. Acting like a goddamn judge and then changing the rules. I told him that I didn't like him dissing my good idea. And it was my idea to rent the telescope out to a lot of people. Who gives a shit? The numbers don't add up anyways. This is all utter bullshit and I'm not going to need. And after that I told him I didn't like the way that he looked at me. I jumped up and skipped away every last basic English class. Having a bad day, were you? I asked. I moved out of my mom's the night before, Joey said. His eyes were bright with tears. He kept breathing. She wasn't doing so good last year, and her boyfriend was a dick, and he used to say things that I didn't like to hear. He's a lot bigger than me, Rube. Bigger than you. I ain't scared of you either, any longer. She made me leave, made me promise to stay away. Are you a shrink or something? No, Joe, I'm a freelance journalist sometimes. Right now I'm just me. I said, Joy, have you thought about what he asked you, why the numbers did matter to your idea? I still don't know, Rube. But yeah, I think about it sometimes, he said, resigned. One time it occurred to me that it would have been easy for me to find out more about the telescope because there was a website address on the ad too. Alice let me use a computer. That's where I started staying. That's where I'm staying, man. Alice is. Checked the webpage. Sure enough, there's a link on the stores to the world where you could get one of them. I checked the stores. The cheapest one was in Montreal and was listed for 10 grand. So I guess there wasn't much use for it after all. Never be able to get that kind of money to start with. It was all a pipe dream anyway. Alice. What was Alice, wasn't it? Last name, phone, address, phone number. I inquired, checking his facts, making notes. He answered without hesitation. "You've been with her since you left your mom's place?" I asked, using a gentle, respectful tone. He nodded. "Well, Mr. Joey, this concludes the interview," I said, closing my notebook and twiddling the handle of the driver's side window with the first big flakes of marine effect snow began to drift through the resettling atmosphere. The window grudgingly agreed to comply. Screwed up 2 mere inches and then sealing out fate. "I'm glad to say you've got the job you wanted. Do you have any questions?" I raised my eyebrows with anticipation and gave him time to answer. That alone ought to tell you something about the kind of person you're dealing with. "What do you think it changed in the letter, Rube?" he asked, turning to look at me, pulling his seatbelt on for the first time and clicking it shut. "Ask me later, much later," I said, turning the radio's volume back up a little. "In the meantime, think about that a bit today as we do our first thing. Or do our thing. No time to talk about it over now, or it's the first job for me. Your first job is going to be pick the groove from here to there," I said, handing him the MP3 player. "Break it, or should it suddenly disappear without a trace, I'm going to hold you responsible. There's lots on there in your shotgun." Joey started looking through the list on the player. It wasn't the top of the line, but it had 40 gigabytes of musical glory, all arranged with sense and that intuitive touch that only egomaniacs can inspire, it seems. The discographies were nearly as impressive as the range of music I had available. I left them to look over the wine list as I put the car in first gear, negotiated my way back into the flow of traffic, checking my corners with efficient ease. The clock on my car said it was just after 12 noon, not the best time to be expected to make an efficient pickup or delivery, since people went on their lunch breaks, and with times like ours, that often meant offices closed up for an hour midday. And yet, even with the snow quickly accumulating on the roads, encouraged by the brisk morning air that had cooled everything to near freezing, I had no fear of finding the first destination empty by the time we'd arrived there. For we were heading the only sure place to find someone ready to serve all day and sometimes late at night. That last bastion of the will of the Newfoundlander and Labradorian, the cookie jar. Turning hard to the right, cutting on the Bonaventure with flair and daring befitting a foreign car such as mine, I paused to think about just exactly what I had to do when we got there. The job was simple. I had to pick up a load of boxes from the Queen's Laundry, located in the bowels of the Eastern Bloc, first. This required a standard operating procedure involving a security guard, a signing log, and a little sticker that says visitor but means you're on camera. Queen's Laundry is immediately to the left in the nearest public entrance, but due to the design of the building, I'd had to walk the length of one of the wings twice in order to get to that front desk. I had contacts on the inside, of course. What self-respecting courier doesn't, this day and age? But that was just insurance, in the end, for prompt and reliable service. All others stand in the lineup. But the job didn't end there. Having completed that first pickup, I'd had to swing across the parking lot to the Western Block, where I'd retrieve a second related set of documents that were currently being held in the clutches of the Department of Transportation and Good Times. They hadn't changed the name of it officially as yet, but when you hardly hear about one without the other, when you hear about them talking about themselves. So there's lots of funny place names in Newfoundland. You ever heard one about the road to hell? They paved it in the vicinity of Good Times, my friend, with the best of intentions and spared no expenses. Again, I'd had to fill into the logbook and get a cute little sticker, and then there was always the line up the front door at the Western Block. Sometimes they'd even have people sitting down there on to the left and to the right of the main doors, the little couches that had no backs, mere ottomans really. These people looked for all the world like they were waiting to see a principal. A few moments later, some well-groomed public employee would come and escort them into the complex. I never could tell why they let some of us just go in and why they made other people wait by that door, but I had spent many pensive moments in the lineup of the foyer wondering about it. Can't say that there were always happy moments. Sometimes I thought I had it all figured out when the people were still sitting there and I was on my way out of the block, but I never stuck around long enough to be really sure. Time is money, and usually you waste them when you're talking about the cookie jar. I don't feel at home there. Even after they made it law that protesters must go out into the elements and brave the traffic of a dual-lane 70-kilometer-per-hour highway rather than protest inside of their House of Assembly. I cannot imagine why. Civilized like the seal hunt, from a certain point of view, I suppose. "Who's this wonderful grand band?" asked Joey, out of the blue. It had taken him a few moments to skim the list to the W's. I made a mental note to put in accommodation for thoroughness and attention to detail. "Good groove, Joey, that's what they are," I said. "I'm not big on all their tunes. The love songs are best saved for the right company, if you know what I'm saying." I gave Joey a sideways wink. "And that ain't you, my boy. That wonderful grand was formed in the late 1970s, before you were born. There's a wonderful grand playlist already made up with added tracks from other artists." "Why did you pick that?" I asked, mystified. "You've been playing most of them songs more than the rest," he said, smiling. "I also said something right about the wonderful grand something in the harbour. When I sees the harbour, I thinks about the bubble and the smell. Nothing wonderful grand about that. So I don't think that was a good answer for you then and there. Honesty is the best policy if you're looking for long-term plan benefits, comfort of house and home, and peace of mind." I guess Joy wasn't afraid of thinking anymore. Good sign. "Well, since they're the ones stalking my musical tastes, why don't you start the playlist already?" I suggested, removing the cig from behind my ear and sticking it to the corner of my mouth. Joey screwed down his window, seeing I intended to abuse his lungs once again. For a moment I thought he was going to throw my MP3 player out the window, but the moment was fleeting and fast, so I kept on talking and paid more attention to Joey, glancing from the road every few seconds. The playlist began with "Living in a Fog." I checked my shirt pocket for my lighter. This is the place where I usually would put the lighter, but having checked, I found it wanting. I remember having deposited said lighter on the dash of the car. There was no lighter apparent, and thus joined to the case, I asked Joey, "Did you see my lighter?" He pointed to the window, and then out the window. "If it's okay with you, Rube," he said, keeping an even tone, "I'd prefer if you didn't smoke in the car. Thank you very much." I'm a reasonable man, I thought to myself. I put the cigarette in my pocket, and then I bided my time. I have to add, I determined a while back I would not abuse the lungs of any man, woman, or child with sufficient gumption to ask this of me. 1-to-1, as it were. I cannot reasonably dispute that we share the air, and so the benefit of doubt must be mine in some regards. To have the same genteel courtesy extended in return makes the decision far more becoming for everybody, if you ask me. "Joey, we're headed to the cookie jar first," I said. Slipping into the shorthand lingo would suffice for the job. We're moving at posted speeds just past Empire Avenue and should be on Allendale Road soon. Where do you think that might be?" "There's some new store up on Stavanger," he asked. "I never heard of it before." "No, it's a lot closer than that. We'll be there in about 5 minutes. 4 sets of lights," I continued, giving him a little more of a puzzle to suss over. "I understand this might be a bit confusing, Joey, but all shall be clear. It's also pronounced scavenger," I added, correcting his dialect. "Scavenger, that's cute," he grinned. "This gotta be community college then," he said, puzzling over the clues. "The college on the Parkway, right, is the cookie jar?" He looked a little more excited himself at that thought. "Left, not right," I grinned, and waited for his reply. I was just pulling in traffic on Allendale, much of which was headed in the opposite direction to us at that time of day. The next intersection was at the top of the rise where Elizabeth Avenue crosses Allendale, and the light was ripening. "But the college is to the right," said Joey, screwing his eyebrows down in confusion. "Are you teasing me or something? I don't understand." "Yes and no, Joey," I said, pulling to a stop with the accumulating traffic, feeling the tires of my car skid just a little under the accumulating snowfall. Yeah, I'm teasing you for saying right when you said the college, and no, the cookie jar is not the college. It's actually on the left-hand side of the road if we take the parkway and head east. Joey thought about that for a few seconds more and answered without joy. That's gotta be the Confederation Building. Then, why do you call that the cookie jar? Joey, have you ever heard the song, "Someone Stole a Cookie from the Cookie Jar"? I asked. Joey indicated the negative. Hit pause on the MP3 player, please. It's usually spoken more than sung, but you sing it with a bunch of your friends, and what you do is you pick one of their names and accuse them of taking a cookie from the cookie jar. The person you pick has to deny they took a cookie from the cookie jar, and then pass that accusation on to somebody else. All you have to say, if you're the one accused, is 2 lines, and then it's your turn to pick somebody. Just say, "Who, me? Couldn't be," and I'll do the rest. So it'll go like this. Who stole the cookie from the cookie jar? Joey stole the cookie from the cookie jar. And I nodded to Q. "Who, me?" said Joey. "Yeah, you," said I. "Couldn't be," said Joey, looking at me with a question, if that's possible. "Then who?" I asked him with a smile and a shrug. Now we started again by you asking who stole it first because you're the last one to have been accused. You get to pick the 3rd degree next. In this case, with our caucus of 2, it's going to be an unsatisfying and very long game that'll end in bitter spite and ugly words before we get anywhere at all. So let's just end song time and try to get back to the matter at hand. "Why is the con fed the cookie jar?" I asked him, trying to keep it moving, emphasizing the con. The light changed. "'Cause you sound like a politician," he grinned. "I guess you now you're talking about how the politicians are supposed to be doing their jobs, and all they do, and all they are is another bunch of crooks who blame one another and then they get caught." "Well, a little of the yes and no again," I admitted. That's a very harsh word to use for them, crooks. And it's not the one that they're very often like hearing used when you talk about them. Especially to their faces, I added, with a wry grin of my own. The facts, though, require checking, so while it's satisfying to know in your heart of hearts that they're probably just another bunch of crooks, you have to look at their long game on the whole before you start pointing fingers. The game as a whole is called democracy. And then you get to vote, and when you vote for one of them, what you're actually doing is giving them permission to take a cookie from the cookie jar, because that's the way the game works. The rules of the game we can lump together and call the system, and the system says it's okay to be caught doing something you shouldn't have if you can establish you didn't know that you were doing something wrong. We passed the Arts and Culture Center, coming to the next big intersection, the Parkway. Again, the light was nearly ripe. I continued. "Joey, did you vote last fall?" "No, it didn't seem hardly necessary," he said, perplexed. "I mean, it's not that we didn't know who was going to win, right? I was old enough, but I didn't have anything better to do that day except hang about Alice's and watch MTV, and then I didn't even know any of the people involved. A couple of folks came to the door of the house once or twice, handed out papers with red and orange schemes. The blue ones looked like it was the guy on the flyer, but since I've been talking to you about it, I wonder if it was really him or not." "You have a chance to talk to the man in blue?" I quizzed. "I mean, did he want to talk to you about anything?" Joey shook his head. "Can't say that it surprised me either." "So then, since we've established that we men of honor have given our permission to these politicians to act on our behalf in matters pertaining to the system, civil duty requires that we honor the terms of the contract and extend to them the benefit of a doubt. Those terms are to be found in the very same system. It's up to me and to you to know what the contract says," I added, edging my way into the waiting line of traffic, taking the middle road to cross the parkway and come at the cookie jar from the rear of the building. The traffic on the parkway flew past us. "So no then, it's not because they might be crooks that I call it the cookie jar. It's because the way the system works, when it comes time to figure out who the crooks are, and it looks exactly the same as the cookie jar game. And it's funny to notice this, but when you compare the end results of both, you'll find that it's more like the very same game than you ever dreamed possible. It's like children could be playing this game. And it would work just the same. See? Joey's eyes were bright with full understanding. Not just a moment of first understanding, a moment when you suss a larger pattern you didn't notice. No. It's the deeper moment of cherishing an idea that you know is worth much more than you're currently able to understand in fullness, that you're going to be perfectly able of figuring out the rest yourself. Yeah, Rube, I think I'm onto you now. You're saying that that's the cookie jar. Because the way they play their game, not the crooks who play with it. Joey, you're a smart cookie now, I said, bittersweet smile on my lips. The light changed. We buzzed across the parkway, climbing that long, curving road that winds between the Long Pond, the Elysian Pippi Park, and the hill. Onward into the heart of darkness.